Welcome to On the Way Classroom with Tony Crisp. Each weekday, Monday through Friday, Dr. Crisp will teach the Bible from its historical, geographical, linguistic, and cultural context. Tune in daily to start your day right and to deepen your understanding of how to better walk the way and enjoy the journey. Now, here's your host, Dr. Tony Crisp.
Welcome to On the Way Classroom. Today, we're going to pick up right where we left off in our last session. If it's helpful to you, go back and review the last session so you will be ready for our study today. Now, today we are going to look at the period of the exile. That's right. God had told the prophet Jeremiah that the kingdom was going to fall, and that God was going to exile his people for 70 years out of the land. You see, God didn't break his promises to ancient Israel when he destroyed the northern kingdom, or he took the southern kingdom of Judah into exile and captivity. But God had told the people, this is my land, and I'm going to give it to you as an eternal possession. But you will never be able to enjoy the land and live in the land for a long period of time if you do not obey me. I am giving you this land, and my promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, my promise to David is eternal and it's unconditional, and I will keep my promise. This land I will give unto you, not for your sake, but for Abraham's sake and for David's sake. I will do what I said I would do, but I will also spew you out of the land if you fail to keep my commandments. Now, it's interesting that Shabbat, or the Sabbath, not only was to be observed once a week, but every 7 years, the land was to have a sabbatical year. It was another way that God said, I want to teach you to trust me. So he said, every 6th year, I will give you a bumper crop, and it will be so good that I will make it last until the harvest of the 8th year. Because during the sabbatical year, when the 6th year ends, I want you, just like I've given you rest, just like I've given you a special time to heal and to restore, that is the way I have made the land as well. And so I want it to have a time of rest, a time to restore. So that is called Shabbat yearly, or the sabbatical year. And God, just as he had done in the wilderness with the manna, said, I want you to go out and work and gather your food, the manna from heaven, 6 days. But on the 6th day, I will give you enough supernaturally to last you through not only the 6th day, but the 7th day as well, until on the 8th day, the day of new beginning, I give you a brand new week to start. That's the way it was on a yearly basis for 6 years and then the 7th year. And for 70 sabbatical years, now think of that. You just take 7 years times 70, add that up, and God said there were 70 sabbatical years that you've missed. And I'm going to give the land its rest for 70 years. So the years of captivity were calculated by Jeremiah to be 70 years, and that's exactly what it was. And I want to tell you how I calculate that in just a moment. But how did all this come about? You see, God raises up not only the good, but God allows even people that are more wicked than his backslidden people to come in to discipline his people. That's what God did with Assyria, and that's what God did with Nebuchadnezzar, not only to conquer the wicked kingdom of Assyria, but to discipline his people. And so Nebuchadnezzar was raised up, and he went north from Babylon, what is just outside of modern Baghdad today, and he went to the modern city of Mosul, which was Nineveh in the ancient world, and destroyed Nineveh and conquered Nineveh. And he did that in 612. And then he came south because the Assyrians didn't just quit because their city was conquered, their capital was conquered. And so there was another great battle that happened in what would be northern Syria today. And after that, he came south. And south of Syria, modern day Syria, is the land of Israel. So he came to Jerusalem, and without firing an arrow into the city, there was no one to even fight against him. Nebuchadnezzar took captive what was the first phase of 3 phases of the captivity. In 605 BC, Nebuchadnezzar came to Jerusalem, and he took with him all of the elite, all of the educated, all of the king's family, all who had served in the king's court. And out of those were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. We know Daniel by his name. He had a Babylonian name, but we know him better by Daniel. But we know the other 3 better as the 3 Hebrew children that we know as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those were the people who were with Daniel. They were in captivity together. They were taken away together. And you can read about this in not only the Chronicles material, but you can also read about this in the book of Daniel. And you can read about portions of it in the book of Jeremiah. Because what happened during this captivity, it happened in 605, 597, and 586. In 605, Nebuchadnezzar took away all of those I just described, Daniel and his friends, and all of the elite, and took them to Babylon and put them into a training program that you can read about in Daniel's chapter 1 and 2, especially chapter 1. And as they were away in Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar set up a puppet king and basically said what we would say in our vernacular, don't make me have to come back up here. And so that only lasted to 597, and Nebuchadnezzar came back and he took away everyone that he thought had value and just left the offscouring, those who were what we would call the misfits, and he left them behind. The rejects, the discards. So he took away in 597 the vast majority of the people that remained in the land of Judah, and certainly in the city of Jerusalem. And this time he took away Ezekiel the prophet. So you had Daniel the prophet in the palace and in the capital itself. And then in the land between the rivers, Mesopotamia, on the river Kibar, a canal that went between the 2 rivers, among the common people was Ezekiel. And so God had a prophet among the common people with Ezekiel. He had Daniel in the capital. And back in Jerusalem, with all of those who had been left behind, was Jeremiah the prophet. Now, Jeremiah was from the village just north of Jerusalem of Anathoth. And Anathoth was the place, if you'll recall historically, when King David set up Solomon to be the ruler over his people, king after his death. There was another son, Adonijah, who had Joab and Abiathar. We call him Abiathar, one of the high priests, and who had carried, by the way, the ark of God with David from the house of Obed-Edom all the way to Jerusalem. And so they were with Adonijah. Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet were with Solomon, and he was anointed king at the Gihon Springs, whereas in Rogel, the springs of Rogel, just south of Jerusalem, down the Kidron Valley, is where Abiathar and Joab, the general, were there, and they were anointing Adonijah as king. Now, when Solomon started reigning, he banished Abiathar. He did not kill him as he did Joab, And he banished Abiathar from Jerusalem and put him in the city of Anathoth, which is just north of Jerusalem, in the vicinity of the tribe of Benjamin. Now, why is that important? Because Jeremiah was one of the rejects from the priestly line that was living in Anathoth. I personally believe, historically, that this is why Jeremiah and that village was not taken, because they were looked upon as disloyal to the kingdom itself. They were of the tribe of Abiathar and the city of Abiathar, and so I believe that's why Jeremiah was left behind in the great providence and sovereignty of God. I may be wrong, but that's what I personally believe after studying the historical material in the Bible and extra material of the day. And so this is what I believe happened. So God had a prophet in Jerusalem with his people there. He had a prophet with the common people, and he always does, in the land of the common people. But then he always had a prophet that would speak to the kings and be an influencer and be a prophet and the mouthpiece of God to the corridors of power of the ancient world. And so after Nebuchadnezzar had already been there twice in 605 and in 597, he came back in 586 after a rebellious people rebelled against the king of Babylon, against the word of God that Jeremiah had sent in a letter to the people, and against Jeremiah's counsel from God. They rebelled against the king of Babylon, and he came back, and this time, not only did he take the furniture and all the gold and silver and all of the goods and jewels that were there in the city of Jerusalem and the temple of God and the storehouses of God, he destroyed the beautiful temple that Solomon had built hundreds of years earlier. Jerusalem was now totally destroyed. And the timetable for the 70 years was set. Now, I believe that the 70 years began in 586. Yes, they were already in captivity. And you can date that another way from 605 to 535 and get 70 years, and there's a reason for that I'll go into the next session. But I believe 586 placed the people of God without a central worship place. And that is when the great spiritual and literal exile began. And it was not restored. The restoration truly did not take place until the temple, the second temple, after 70 years to the year that the first temple was destroyed, then the second temple was dedicated. That was a period of 70 years when the people did not have a central worship place. Now, God used that time, as we'll see in the next session, to do what only he could do. But that is the period, I believe, of 70 years recorded by Jeremiah the prophet, that the people would be out of the land. The temple was destroyed in 586. The second temple was dedicated in 516. That's a period of 70 years. I believe that is the formal days of the 70 years of exile. In our next session, we're going to deal with God's miraculous work through Daniel and through the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, and the work of Zerubbabel in getting the people ready for a new adventure with God in a period that we call the period of restoration.
Thanks for listening to On the Way Classroom with Dr. Tony Crisp. Tune in each weekday for more information on how to read, study, and understand the Bible. If you have questions, please write to questions@tonycrisp.org. That's questions@tonycrisp.org. Questions@tonycrisp.org. Thanks for listening and have a blessed day on the way.